You know, if it's Friday, the wheels do indeed keep turning. I'm Lovebabz, and this is Lovetalk, and we are doing the damn thing. So our good friend and my love, Enroue, is back, and we are talking about all things in the Orisha traditions and a little bit of everything else. Hello.
Yes.
Happy
Hello,
anniversary.
Good morning. Thank you.
20.
20, yes. October 17th.
I was married on the
1999.
19th, and it would have been 24 years. Yeah, so we like to say we've known each other for 24 years.
Yes.
We're divorced, but
Right, there's still a relationship. There's still something there.
We know each other. So
Yeah.
how are you?
I'm good.
What's
I
happening?
love the fall. So
you
that's
know, yeah.
I'm just saying what I love. That's all. I'm just claiming.
You know
that.
what? I love the beginnings of the fall. I don't like when they start to meld into winter. But then when winter comes and it's beautiful, I'll feel like, oh, I love this.
So it's all conditional.
Yeah. Fair weather. Fair weather. So
Yes.
how are you? What are we talking about today,
well,
Mr.
Well, first,
Enroue?
just wanted to give some thanks to, all of our ancestors, all of those who have lived and loved and tried to be people, even in the midst of some really hard times.
Oh.
Right? And those, not that hard times are done, but to give thanks and to lift up really where we come from and the complexities of that, and that is also a source of our resilience and strength and love and beauty as well.
Yeah.
Not just sources of trauma.
Mm-hmm.
It's very often whoever we are, right? We can, part of the kind of American story is the kind of looking forward and kind of forget, like, oh, well, that happened in the past, so let's forget about that. And I think there's richness and value in being able to hold the complexity of hurt, trauma, both that's systemic, had been a part of a culture, as well as individual and interpersonal within families. That's also how harm happens. But that is not the totality of who we are. That's not the totality of what we can draw upon in terms of even honoring where we come from and what that is. So just a start off there.
I like that. I feel like I feel like we should have an altar.
That's what we do.
I think from now on I got to build an altar. Every time you come, we got to have something. Like
well, there's a real piece of at least understanding, claiming how we also kind of house our ancestors. We house all of the where we come from, both in good and negative ways. Right, we can kind of hold those traumas that sometimes aren't ours, and that can get confusing. But we can also house and be a portal or a channel or repository or receptacle or container for blessings and goodness and life affirming ways of being a human being as well. And so whether there's an honoring space that people have on a mantle, whether we have something here, whether it's an altar, however we want to frame it, just that this is a reminder of how we can plug into the fullness also of who we are, to get support, to let us know that we're not alone. And with this, kind of going into this conversation or some things I want to touch upon today around wellness and around mental health, and kind of particularly kind of seeking connection to professionals in that way. I don't remember what the program was or what it was referring to, but I've heard something on the radio and it kind of triggered all these thoughts. So I thought this was, for today, would be a good opportunity to share some of those thoughts about like where our seeking help is on us, kind of our agency with that. So if we just talk about like finding a therapist, for example, just the concrete thing, and where the challenges to that are actually on the profession itself, kind of naming both of those, because very often it gets put on, for example, like why don't marginalized people, or why don't people of color, or why don't Black people seek supports within the mental health profession? And very often it's framed as this is how it lives in the Black community, this is how it lives in Black people, and that's where the kind of the burden of why or why not its access is put upon, without also realizing that there's a very long history in this country of specifically mental health professionals, but kind of medical professionals, either overtly or covertly abusing Black people and people of color.
Yeah,
and using our bodies and our minds
that's very
as
real
places of experimentation.
And I just read a piece yesterday or early this morning about how the algorithms are skewed in such a way that Black people don't get the care and the prescriptions needed at the same way that white people do. Right. I thought, damn.
And there are ways that because of what the nature of white supremacy does is that Black people are seen as super/subhuman, so our pain thresholds are greater. So we actually don't receive, for example, prescriptions of pain medication, or not recognized as experiencing pain in the same way that white people are.
Yeah.
So if someone's saying, "Well, I'm hurting," there's a dismissal of that.
Yes.
Of saying, "Well, it's all right. You can take it."
And we see that in the Black women maternal health care.
Yeah, we see it all over. So, and there's also you also have what you're bringing up, kind of compounding, is when you add issues around gender. So also in terms of medicine, and so this is to be transparent, right? This isn't kind of my research or anything in particular around like medicine or pain management. This is research that I've come across and read and listened to, that medicine and dosages are also skewed towards the standard of white men.
Yeah.
And so if you're A, not white, and B, not a man in terms of your physicality in your body, medicines, which like here's your ibuprofen, don't you just take this to deal with it, right? It's actually not skewed for a range of bodies. And so if your body is smaller, right, then that is going to be too much that you're taking.
I just read a piece.
Then it's not enough.
I just read a piece yesterday on cholesterol medication and how at least more they don't prescribe statin therapy at the same rate for Black people as they do for white people. And that's why you see so much. That's one of the reasons why you see the prevalence of us dying more from heart disease, because we are not given statins to stave off heart disease and cholesterol. But and I thought that was quite interesting. But then I saw a piece too where what you just said, that Black people push back on being prescribed medication.
Right. And so this is the complexity, is that or in terms of seeking treatment, or it's also in terms of men seeking treatment in general, right? There's stuff that's been engendered of, we can take it, we don't go see these people, we don't kind of attend to our health in the same way. And I think so when people say, oh, well, we need to look at why, well, we could just say, well, the why is white supremacy, the why is male supremacy. And if that's true, because if it wasn't true, you wouldn't actually have the demographic split that you do. So either you believe that, quote, those people are not whatever the story is, or there's a system at play, right? So the I wonder why is can get really, actually, we don't need research and data. We actually just need to change policies and practices and training. And so this other piece around mental health is, yes, there is already a sea of distrust, and there are ways that mental health professionals don't have an awareness of how oppression impacts people and how to undo it and offset it in their treatment. So people of color are kind of over pathologized, as well as dismissed. So you have kind of a both.
There's no middle ground.
There's not a middle ground.
There's no middle ground.
And so to for professionals to be able to understand that the quote mental health issues that they're seeing also have and exist in these other realms that aren't just about some internal kind of intrapsychic phenomenon, right? It's not just the person in their mind which is making things difficult, which is causing stress, but there is stress, there's chronic stress in our society, there's chronic stress about dealing with the impact of racism and oppression. There's things that happen in terms of housing and economics and schools that are racialized that impact our mental health, right? And so, you know, I'm kind of centering around blackness right now, but there's really actually about addressing really white supremacy and ways that like other marginalized peoples are also impacted similarly. But for now, instead of kind of ticking off these are ways that this is impacting every group, oppression kind of lands in the same way.
Yes.
Right? We're dehumanized. And so there is how do we understand that, and how do we change systems and trainings of professionals so they're not continuing that cycle? And it's something that very much I hold in my own practice. So my practice, you know, really, I try to be explicit around like, here's the kind of mental health pieces. And yes, there are things that are about you or these relationships or family that needs to be addressed. And, you know, part of this distress that you're feeling is also because it's a system that doesn't see you as a human being, or a system that dismisses your concerns, or a system that very easily pathologizes your children. So you're getting a phone call every day, and that's the stress that you're dealing with.
Oh my God.
And I can't, there's not just you change the switch inside your head and that system goes away. But we may be able to work on addressing a solution, which is about, maybe you need to have some support to address the system instead of just thinking it's your fault and it turning into your own, you know, depression, anxiety, addiction, harm that's happening. So just as so one piece is the profession needs to move and needs to be able to not just, then I need to, as a professional, need to understand every single marginalized group and every marginalized category, because that would be like, somehow I have to understand everybody. And if I get some mastery over that information, then that translates. And instead saying, wow, can I understand that there are systems of oppression that are occurring? They target certain people in certain ways. Then I can be curious about this person in front of me and their tradition or their aspects of identity, and understand that that is both a source of strength and support, and also is a way that they can be targeted. So that's kind of one component of the kind of the burden actually is on the profession itself. The other piece is about people's own agency and to be able to get care, because the avoidance of it isn't helping when you need care, and the just jumping in blind and just saying yes to whatever people say is also not the way. And so very often it's hard for people to recognize that they also get to decide what they need and have conversations with providers about what they need or what doesn't work. And I want to encourage people not to kind of ignore the good in search of the perfect in terms of providers. So
that's a good point. That's a very good point.
I'll say that in terms of two examples. So one is myself, even in terms of seeking primary care provider. And, you know, there are a lot of things in kind of alternative medicine, acupuncture, naturopathic medicine, things like that, which are important to me, which are part of my wellness. So I could spend a very long time trying to find kind of a regular Western practitioner, you know, doctor, APRN, whatever, who believes what I believe. And that's a very difficult search. However, maybe I can find someone who is, that they don't necessarily promote it, but they're open to that being a part of my wellness.
Right.
And that might be fine. And so I can actually bring up some things in that situation, like, oh, well, I'm also seeing this person, and this is what happened. This is how I'm dealing with my health overall. And that provider might say like, oh, well, good. I don't know anything about it, or that's not kind of what I would tell you to do. But like, if this is working for you, great. Right. And so more of myself gets to show up in that interaction.
Yeah.
But there are also very skilled medical providers who I may need to see for some reason, maybe there's a specialist or something that actually debunks these other things that I care about. And I can decide in that moment, do I want to see this person to get the skill that they have and access that? And I'll kind of leave this other part out the door, because right now I need this particular thing from them. And then I can hold this other thing as valuable for me. I don't have to prove it to them. Doesn't have to be a part of a conversation. And that's kind of another way of, because I'm still getting that need met. I'm just not with this particular provider. Right. So I still get to hold all that wellness. And then there may be people who kind of are seeing a provider, and because of not being seen and by being silent, they're actually not getting a fullness of care in their life that they need.
Yeah.
Right. So they're seeing a provider who maybe minimize that, who maybe doesn't see them, and doesn't value the things that they value, and the person themselves doesn't have the capacity or isn't able to bring that into their lives.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where the both and of I want to encourage people. So that's the kind of medical piece which I've navigated. And so even in terms of therapists, you can kind of bring the same kind of questioning and advocacy. Some therapists, for example, religion and spirituality is kind of a thing that they tick off a list. Like, oh, well, what's yours? Okay, I understand that. And they kind of move on. And if that's something that's fundamental to your health and well-being, it's important for you to bring that into the room. This person may not be skilled at integrating it, but you still actually get to bring it into the room in a way that actually works. Now, if that then gets pathologized, you got some choices. You can say, well, I don't bring that into the room because I'm getting this other care I need. Or you say, I need to find somebody else because harm is happening, right? The diminishing of me as a person is happening.
Man, that is so, man, you know what kind of agency you'd have to have of yourself to be able to do that?
Well, it's
I mean, I could do it, you could do it, but I'm just thinking about the people who cannot, like.
Yeah, but what I want to do is I want to invite people to even understand that it's possible.
It's possible.
Because most people don't think it's possible. It's like, I'm going to see this person. I just have to do what they tell me.
Yeah. But I see that in not just the health profession. That's that's the education profession. That's everywhere.
Right. So maybe we can encourage that everywhere.
Yeah. I like that.
And that's part of the pushback because we know, right? I know to whatever extent I do, like these are the things that both fill me up and tear me down. And this person is trying actually to assess what's going on and to offer something good. That's our hope anyway. And the more that we understand and bring that agency of ourselves to the interaction, right, to the work, to the therapy, to whatever that healing space is, then it can actually be more relevant. If we don't even bring ourselves, then the intervention can't be relevant.
Yeah.
And there's an idea that it is. And that's part of the, it's like if you don't tell anybody the symptoms, how can you kind of get at what's underneath it? And even if we kind of leave a model where everything is just about eliminating symptoms, if you don't bring the fullness and the complexity of who you are, then even that whole picture, that holistic picture can't be brought out. And in traditional communities, that was more understood, that there are these layers of who we are as human beings. So actually, we have to try to address as many layers as possible. And one person might hold a lot, and then you kind of need to go to somebody else. And then there's your life itself that's a holder.
Yeah.
And I think that part of this is just encouraging people to understand that they're more of themselves that is relevant. That's relevant for their wellness. And if something is off and they're going to somebody else, bring it. Yeah. Bring yourself there. And then see if this person can meet your needs. Yeah. Instead of like, oh, somehow I have to fit into their model and how they want to deal with me.
I love this point that people want to. I love this notion of people bringing their whole selves to this. I mean, and what I hear when you say that is, people should tell their doctors, this is my work schedule. This is my eating habits. This is what I do after work. This is, so that when you walk in there and say, you know what, something is hurting,
right?
They get a bigger picture of, okay, I see the landscape.
Yeah. There's an understanding of, kind of clinically we talk about a baseline, right? So there's no, I'll say it, there's no like objective normal.
Yeah.
Right. So some people sleeping 5 hours a day might be actually really normal and functional, and like really that's what they need. And someone else, that might be a sign of like something being really off.
Yes.
right? And so that we look for the big changes, right? Well, I've been doing this, and now I'm like sleeping 10 hours a day, or now I'm sleeping 2 hours a day. Well, what was it before? And how disruptive, what is the disruption that's happening? And then what's happening in your life?
Yeah.
And the models that we have are much more try to approach things in some kind of objective way. And some things are measurable, but many things aren't. And we actually have to be in a different way of understanding of what a problem is and also what wellness is.
Yes.
And so really encouraging people to really bring themselves and to push back, right? So if a provider says something that's kind of funky, wow, what if we just say like, well, I don't understand that, or that doesn't seem right, or, you know, I'm really trying to not just take more medication. Are there other things I can do? I don't want, whether it's kind of physical health or mental health. And can you just help me to understand what this is about? Are there side effects? Is this like, I now have to take this for the rest of my life? Or is there, now I'm in a crisis, I need to take it, but we're going to work on other ways of doing it? Allow your curiosity and not knowing, and in some ways turn it around in the professional to justify what they're doing.
Yeah.
Right? Not as like, I don't trust you, you don't know what you're doing, but like, well, why? and the person should have a reason.
Yeah.
We don't just, you know, when we bring our car somewhere, we don't just drop it off and don't say anything and don't find out what was done. And then it just kind of comes back.
No, and they'll tell you this on a checklist.
Right.
It's like, okay, thank you.
Right? And you sometimes go like, I don't know, it's making this weird noise.
Yeah.
When I do this, okay, can you make it happen again? Or when does it happen?
Yeah.
Like, there's a little bit more of a picture of it. And then they can start to have diagnose and assess. And so the more we bring, the more accurate that assessment and diagnosis, not in terms of like, here's your kind of mental health diagnosis, which can happen, but like the assessment of what's happening and then where the intervention needs. Yeah. Because sometimes the work that I do, the intervention is in the room, and sometimes the intervention is like, no, you need to like go to this support group that's over here, because part of what you need is to be connected to people. And so being with people, talking about that issue is going to give you something that you cannot get in this room. Yeah.
That's a good point. That's such a good point. Yeah. And I think if we could, that ought to be a movement of getting people to come into their agency of sharing their whole selves when they go to these appointments. I don't think anybody's doing that. I mean, I don't know if anybody's saying that to people.
I think there's more complexity, but it tends to come from certain kind of pushbacks or policies. So there's more conversations by some providers, like around depression or around is there a gun in the house, because it gets tied to specific other things that have happened, not in terms of our wholeness, right? Not just in general. Oh, like, how are you sleeping, or like, how's your digestion, or like, what is your dreams like? Like, no, I have like a cough and it's on this side and it does this and I have these spots on it, and so we're going to give you this thing to do it. And there are certain interventions that are very clear and like, oh yes, you do this, you take this, that actually makes this thing go away. But there are other things in terms of our wellness that it will not touch.
Yes. And I think that's where the healthcare system drops the ball with the marriage between mental health providers and internist and GP, and that, you know what I mean? Like it never seems to be. It's always pieces of you that are treated, right? Not the holistic you, right? Do you know what I mean? Like, my mental health provider should be talking to my internist, right? And saying, you know, this, that, and the other thing. But it doesn't seem to. You get referrals and they refer back. You know, they send their reports back, but it's not a cohesive like.
And it happens in particular arenas. Yeah, so that doesn't necessarily happen with people's spiritual supports. Yeah. Right. Absolutely. As providers of care and wellness. Yeah. Right? And it's, you know, I've had some experiences where someone is struggling in an area, and it's like, and they're over here and they have this kind of support. Say, oh, well, is it okay if I contact them just like I would contact their physician? Or, I mean, there's things that happen legally, right? So there's conversations, the lawyer's got to call, and we're doing this as a court case, right? So there's conversations with providers, but not often in these arenas, which I think particularly with religion and spirituality and mental health, there can be such an either or that happens, and each is not seen as necessarily a source of support and connection centered around
unless of course you're in the emergency room about to die,
right?
Then then your spiritual people are called or summoned.
Well, the spiritual people connected to the hospital are called and summoned.
But they will ask you, do you have a minister that we can call, or
yes.
do you have and then people are called.
Right.
They're not called in the they're called at the what looks like the end of things.
Yes. Right. Not just you showed up.
Yeah.
Right. Imagine that. Like, are there other resources that like we need to call just to give you support to navigate being in a hospital?
Yeah.
Right. I made a list of things to to remember, because it's very easy not to. And there were some things. Well, there's some things I wanted to touch upon. So one thing is trauma. The word trauma is thrown around a lot.
Oh gosh.
And I think that a couple things. One is what is traumatic for one person is not necessarily traumatic for the other. So there can be a traumatic event, let's say an act of violence. Let's say someone gets murdered in a community, and two people living next door may experience that in different ways, regardless of their relationship to the person. And so that's just the reality of trauma. In the same way that two people can be in an accident and break a bone, yet their experience of that and the healing of that is very different. The emotional toll that the meaning that it has can be very different.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of one piece around, that's just the reality of who we are as people and some of the differences we have. Another one is that there's also kind of the effects of ongoing and chronic stress, which is also traumatic. And so one event can cause an overwhelming of the system, but long-term chronic things can also do that.
Mm-hmm.
Because then our systems can have, it's like having adrenaline pumping through your system all the time. As human beings, we're not designed for that. And so that's kind of where burnout happens. That's where numbing can happen.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that kind of component of trauma. And there's a way that there's a difference between how trauma is generally understood in the mental health field as this kind of a thing that overwhelms the system, whether that's an accident or whether that's this sense of danger to the body and to yourself, and ways that is also embedded in systems of oppression, right? So, and by identifying it with particular systems of oppression, white supremacy, male violence, things of that nature, we actually then can look at what the intervention is, versus it's all typically addressing trauma for most mental health people is about helping to change something in the person, their perspective, the ways that's been harmed, rethinking of it. There's lots of techniques to deal with trauma, but it's not often anchored in actually what might need to happen systemically, what might other interventions be in terms of that person connected to community or raising their awareness that this exists. So, for example, domestic violence or intimate partner violence is a relational traumatic thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? Might be one time, might be ongoing. But solely addressing it as this internal thing that the kind of identified victim or person who's been harmed has, that is not necessarily the only intervention that is going to solve it. It may also be important that the person understands, like, oh, yes, this happened. This person did this to you, and you are part of a system and a society that then puts a burden of proof on you as a victim to justify and defend yourself. Like, well, what did you do for this to happen?
Yeah.
And that's actually part of a system of oppression.
Mm-hmm.
And so we don't understand that. We don't understand internally what's happening in that person's mind to blame themselves, to kind of hold the weight and responsibility that someone else has harmed them. Oh, no, it's not. Actually, they have harmed me. And actually, I can see this in the culture. I see this in media. I see this so this isn't just in my head. This isn't just, I need to change something, because it also exists outside of me.
Yes.
And the more we understand when that occurs, that relationship, undoing that as a source of raising your awareness or your consciousness, kind of like being politicized in some way, can actually be a source of strength. And understand that, oh, this is out there. I certainly need to like care for myself and heal a thing that is inside, but but the other intervention is about like pushing back on that this also exists outside of me. And that's an important component that providers need to hold. So that's not just, well, we're just dealing with trauma and like, quote, community violence is generally traumatic, right? So, well, what do you mean by community violence? Is police shooting people in the community violence? Is domestic violence community violence? Is education system community violence? Incarceration system community violence? Like, what are we saying it is? And if we're saying that is traumatic, we actually need to incorporate system change to undo the trauma and undo the harm that continues, and not just, we're going to patch this person to reduce their symptoms, to make them more functional,
and then send them back into community.
Exactly.
And then we'll see them again in 90 days.
Yeah. And just kind of put it on them.
Yeah.
Oh, well, are you taking your meds, or are you doing your relaxation things?
Yeah.
And not understand that a different type of intervention, and to me, our clinical kind of ethics and responsibility is not that we all have to be the ones to go fix that, but to address it and to inform the people we're working with that is also where harm is happening. It is not just make sure you're safe from this particular person. You can kind of do that, but like, oh, right. And how do I navigate when I'm getting this message from the shows that I watch, or the other relationships I'm in, or what happens at my work? Right. And so those are also places of, again, not that, so me as a provider has to be the fix it to all of those things, but at the very least say, this is a place that's important for you to look at.
Yeah.
And maybe that's a source of support for somebody, and maybe it's not for somebody else. Right. But it at least is in the realm of what's happening to this person that is also harmful.
I like the wholeness of that, because that's taking somebody's life in totality. I think. Right. You know, you're not compartmentalizing pieces of whatever. Right. Because I'm of the belief that whatever is ailing you ails you all the way around. Oh, yeah. You know what I mean? Like, you just don't have a cold in your head. You have a cold in your whole body. Yeah. You know, so.
And what is leading you or us to be susceptible to that?
Yes.
Is also important, right?
Yes.
If I'm doing these other things to care for myself, then I'm less likely to get that cold, right? Colds are the virus is actually around.
Yes.
And we catch it. Right. And then we catch it.
Yeah.
Right. And so, you know, there's certainly things that, you know, depending on what our resilience is and our health is.
Yeah.
And it's the same with nature, right? The more resilient and strong nature is, the more resilient.
Well, that's what vaccines are. They inject you with the vaccine so that your body develops a resiliency to the actual disease.
And so in the same way, this aspect of like consciousness, right? This like, oh, so this is how oppression works? Oh, you mean that there have been, not everywhere all the time, but there have also been sanctioned experiments done on people?
Yeah.
Oh, doesn't mean everybody all the time is, but like to know that happens, so that if something is happening between you and a provider, you can, oh, so what is that about? Or why is this? Or, you know, I don't want to sign off on that, even though I'm getting a gift card here, but like, whose research for what is this about?
Yes.
And just start to have some curiosity there.
Like, you know, make them tell you what they're doing.
Yeah. And for who? And I mean, that gets into also kind of a level of exploration, which I think is difficult. You know, you kind of need resources like, well, I'm going to go find that out, and I'm going to do these things. But to understand that you have a right to that, and understanding, you say, oh, you know, I don't want to do that. I actually just want the care, and I don't want to sign off on this then going somewhere else for somebody else's research. Maybe benign, might not be. And I don't want to take that risk, so I can make some other choices. The other thing I want to add is that it can also be so easy, and even in my practice, it can happen, to anchor so much on, this is the problem, this is the hurt, this is the trauma, this is the way that we're all just a mess. Right. and so easy to forget the health and the resilience that we have already demonstrated. Right?
Sorry, I missed that. Did you say?
Sorry, my phone is listening.
Yes. Sorry, I missed that. Can you say that again? Yes, it's very often right? That our health and our strength, and the very thing that makes us human, is often put aside and not lifted up and not encouraged in the face of these other things that are wrong that we got to address.
Yeah.
And I liken it to have this like image in my head of, you know, if you have a little plot of land and you're trying to, let's say, grow corn, and you're weeding the heck out of it. I want to make sure nothing gets in the way of, like, I got to get the weeds because I got to grow the corn, so I got to get rid of all the weeds because they're going to take all the nutrients and space. And I could spend the rest of my life weeding that whole thing every day, all the time, and I'm still not going to grow any corn. Because I need to plant it and I need to nourish it, right? I got to do some life-affirming things.
Yeah.
And we have that, which is like how, like, so as in terms of an understanding of race, right? So as like African heritage people, like we have that because that's why we're here.
I tell you what how I take that. When I hear people say we as people are not together, and I think that's not true. We have been together, or we could not have moved through.
We wouldn't be existing.
We would not have been able to move since 1619 to where we are. Like I think it's that talk that we have ingrained and internalized, you know, and that bothers me on a lot of levels when we start that, because I think it dismisses the gains and the way that in which we do come together. You know, I mean, it's evidence in why we have family reunions and why we make pilgrimages to places that are important to us. I mean, we do that as a body, you know.
Now, and this is always an and.
I love the and. You know, I'm a girl for an and. I don't mess with a but I love an and.
So there's a whole other the layer of the and the complexity is, and this is a part of our wellness and our humanness. Can we? So I guess here's this question. So can we, as Black people, find our humanness and our identity that has nothing to do with countering what white supremacy says to us about Blackness? So very often it can be, my Blackness is a counter to, it's still on the terms of what whiteness is saying is valuable, right? So, you know, white supremacy saying, well, here's the playing field, this is what success looks like. Oh, so if I'm a Black person who attains that success, then I'm showing both kind of Blackness as well as what's kind of success means. And what happens if we orient towards what Blackness is, that's actually based on our humanity and something that's life affirming, that might actually have not anything to do with undoing or countering white supremacy. It's the same notion of like growing corn, right? So something, if I'm growing corn, I'm creating a place to nurture that. I don't have to focus as much on weeding because the corn will take the space of it.
And honestly, the weeds can exist with the corn.
Maybe, right? Then we can actually plant other things that are not corn that actually create more, right? There's the three sisters in some indigenous communities around growing beans and squash with corn, and you're creating a whole environment of wellness for all of them that each has a different role to play. They rely on each other and provide something that
I just saw something like that on Facebook when somebody had created a garden that had all these things that
work together,
and that you've never seen. Like farming has always been, you have to just have corn, you have to just have soybeans,
well,
you have to have
certain farming, a certain way of approaching farming. So these things actually have notions come out of indigenous ways of growing, as well as even aspects of what like George Washington Carver. Now I'm stepping a little bit outside of my personal zone of knowledge, but I've been around so many people around farming and food that I like absorb some things, right? And so things around like the first CSAs, things around organic farming, things around the things that are being popularized and seen as kind of white ways of now approaching sustainable agriculture have actually come from Black and brown people, both originally on this land here and then from other parts of the world. And that have been done and then been marginalized and pushed away, and then now kind of being claimed as sustainable agriculture, and it's framed in a way by many people. We've been
sustaining agriculture for hundreds and thousands of years,
right? And so that's even a place of like, oh right, that's our wellness. And actually, that is not in like a pushback of anything. It's like, no, we actually can claim that and find that and nourish that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is also this place of moving towards what you need and what you yearn for, and not only pushing back against like, well, this is a bad thing, so I have to push back against that. Sometimes you do, but sometimes you have to move towards the things you're yearning for, and then that bad thing actually is not relevant because you're turning like left, and this thing's coming at you from like the right, and you just turn and you walk that way because you're going towards the things you want,
Mm-hmm.
and it misses you, as opposed to I gotta go in, I gotta undo this, and I gotta undo that, and I gotta fight this, and I gotta fight that. Some things we do, but what if we did that in terms of what's in the way of what we're yearning for, to keep, it's like keep your eye on the prize in that way, and to keep your humanity and our personhood, even as we are fighting
Mm-hmm.
the problem.
Yeah.
Even as we are trying to address the problem,
Yeah.
we're coming at it with holding our personhood dear.
Yeah. Because I think we can be freedom fighters,
Mhm.
and we can be about
Love and joy,
yes.
and connection.
Yes, it's not mutually exclusive.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I think that has not been the message. I think people have believed that you have to have boots on the ground. You have to always be in the struggle in all aspects of your life. Like you couldn't possibly march today and then have a good time tonight,
Right. Or rest.
or rest,
Recover.
or recover.
Right.
Like take it down.
Remember what it means to be a person.
Yeah.
Because it can be very easy, and because part of that drive and the sense of urgency in there is also actually driven by a culture, which is a part of the oppression. Right? It's like you gotta if you work yourself to death, well,
Yeah.
that's actually really valuable.
Yeah.
As opposed to, what would it look like? Like that's like the monocrop, right? Oh,
Yeah.
we gotta make sure we build corn every square inch, all the places, and this is how we do it, and kill everything else.
Yeah.
Well, what if there can be some coexistence and like some other nurturing that happens and some support that's there, that's
Yeah.
you're creating a different kind of ecosystem
Yeah.
and relationships about wellness and
Yeah.
about health, which actually, again, just like steps outside of this other narrative of like the way it should be, here's the one right way,
Yeah.
and everything else is in and unhuman.
Yeah. Yeah. You make some. I like that. That's some good points right there. Some good points. I'm moving in that direction a lot. Seriously.
Yeah.
Busyness is not the goal.
Right.
Doing what I want to do is the goal. The things that I yearn for, the things that, that really is the goal. And I find that once I've turned that corner, that I don't concern myself so much with those other things.
Yeah.
Now I'm on the forefront just like everybody else. I'm fight the power too, but I also know that this life is one to be enjoyed. There's not another one.
Right. and what it means to try to be free is also different for each of us.
Yeah.
Right. There are, our destinies, our purpose is different for each of us. Every blade of grass is distinct.
Yeah.
Every person and who we are, and how can I also address and hold how I want to be as a person.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be in my day to day, and not only what I'm doing. And the doing part is very much tied to this particular culture we're in. Right? We meet someone like, oh, so what do you do? Right? Not just in terms of work, but like, right, there's the doing that
and then we make
value.
a judgment.
Right.
Then we make a judgment.
Oh, you do that? Oh, like I like or I don't like it. And what I try to do is also, even if I ask that, like, well, if it's something like I don't know anything about, it's like, well, do you like it? Because like the person may be doing something that I don't like but love it, or they may hate it. And it's like, and then there's a different conversation happening about like how they are in it. Like, oh, like you like that? Like, oh yeah. It's like, wow, I don't know anything about that.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like I could not do that kind of work. Like that would be really like boring to me. But like, wow, what is it? Like you really like it. That's great that you have found that. Versus like, oh, I don't like it, so now I don't like you. So that's the end of this conversation. Like that's limiting. That's the same version of like, I guess I got it right. What I love is right, and what you, that's different.
Yes.
So that really can't be right.
Yeah.
Somehow you've gotten confused in your life. And so this piece around how to be is something that's fundamentally right outside of this culture that we're in.
Yes.
This,
I think you're absolutely
Yeah.
right.
yet is actually where we come from.
Yeah.
Right? You know, the
Yeah.
trees and the birds and nature, they're concerned with being
Yeah. They're not trying to.
themselves.
They're not trying to like. They're not trying to redefine success for themselves.
Right? Oh, that tree over there. Oh, that one's doing that. I like that foliage. I gotta like figure out how I could like get that foliage going over here.
Yeah, no, they're not. They're not doing that.
Yeah.
So maybe we should take a page from nature.
Wow, I like
Not
to.
a bad idea.
I like to.
Take a
I-
page from nature.
I
Like,
like
you know
to.
what? I'm just be.
Yeah. Well, that's.
Yeah.
I mean, so as like, what are the things? It's funny. What are the things to do to help us be?
Mm-hmm.
For me, is like that's why I spend a lot of time, or as much time as I can, just sitting and being in nature, because it has something. It has the beingness informs me, and I can see and experience the value of it. Right, as I look out at it, it's like, oh yeah, that works, and to remember that I'm also in it and of it.
Yeah.
And like my value is not actually determined by what I do, right, or how I think other people perceive me, or even how I perceive me. There's an actual value and a groundedness in my being,
Yes.
which has nothing to do with like how I think of. Well, it can have to do with how I think about it, because I can think differently. But the more that I'm able to be open to that, the more and soak that in, that yearning, touching that yearning, and moving with that becomes easier.
I like that. I saw a piece, and maybe Doug Hausleiten posted this. He's a traffic czar here. And it said, you're not in traffic, you are the traffic.
Right.
So I was like, you're not in nature, you are nature.
Exactly.
So I just like, I like that.
Exactly.
So yeah, so you
by
are
bit.
nature.
We
So
are. We are.
thank you.
Mm.
That was a wonderful conversation.
Thank you, Babz.
You have fans out there who are listening.
Woo-woo. I'm glad I wrote some things down so I could have some cohesion.
That's good, fine.
Yeah.
And this
Sometimes I do.
it's perfect for the fall. Just be. Gonna
Yes.
be. We're all gonna work on being.
Mm-hmm.
You know. So thank you, Enroue.
Blessings to everybody.
We'll see you soon.
All right.
All right, Harry, I'm on my way out. Happy Friday, y'all. I'll see
Yes.
y'all Monday.